Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, friends. Today, from Litinfinite, Journal of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, we have arranged this particular evening, which is dedicated to love poetry. About our journal, Litinfinite, we decided to take this up because we are passing through a very tensed situation, very tensed phase. We are just affected by the pandemic, and it's a very tough phase that we all are going through. So some sort of happiness, some sort of poetic season, some spate of poetry, some sort of love poetry that can imbue some colors into our lives, that can infuse some colors into our lives. Specifically taking up the journal's poetry issue, which is going to be published in July, which will be on world poetry, that we are going to take up. So we have taken this initiative in presenting Adhunik Kovitar Prem, Love in Modern Poetry. And we have our esteemed guests tonight. We have eminent poet Prabalkumarbasu. We have poet and
Hi.
translator. We have poet translator Dr. Santosh Alex with us
Hel-
this evening.
Hello.
And we have Dr. Ketaki Datta, who is an academician and who is also a poet. We have Dr. Ketaki Datta with us as well. So I think there is, due to some technical glitch, I can't see. I can't see Ketoki Di. Okay, as of now, we'll just carry on with the thing. So, welcome, sir. Welcome to the show tonight. We are specifically going to take up from Litinfinite modern poetry, and how love is associated. It's such a vast topic, which as such cannot be restricted to any time frame or time duration as such. So I'll just, on behalf of Litinfinite, I thank our respected guests tonight to give us their valuable time to be with us. And I would request poet Prabalkumarbasu to start. And what are his views? Like, it's a discussion that we are having, sir. So, what are your views regarding love in modern poetry? We will be hearing your poems as well, but then if you just speak to our guests tonight.
Well, love is such a beautiful four-letter word. It's not only eminent for poetry. It's true. It's true in every sphere of our life. I mean, whatever we do, we write poetry. We do some work. We love the relationship. It could be any relationship. Love is an essential element in for our survival. If love wouldn't have been there, it would have been difficult for the life to evolve and to move and to come to a shape where we are today. Now, our issue is how love has come to the poetry. In general, when we talk about love, as I said, love could be anything. It could be a man-woman relationship. It could be any relationship. It could be a love for the humanity. It could be love for the country. It could be love for anything. Love is a vast word. But generally, when we come to poetry, generally when love is more featured as a part of the romance. It's more a man woman romance. That is how normally it is portrayed uh, in a poetry. When we talk about the love poem, it is all about the romance, the expression of the feelings towards each other, a man woman relationship. Now, if we I will talk more about more from the background of Bengali poetry. Say, for example, if we talk about Tagore's poem, and in those days, in say, if we call about pre-independence day, or the poetry was more, the love poems used to be more expressive in a way,
Extremely expressive.
all about flowers and chocolates, if we can say about
Exactly.
that. The poet used to express his or her love towards whoever they wanted to love, whatever their feelings, with some examples, some references, and uh, that all flowery things. But after the independence, especially after we in Bengali we call it 50s, when poets like Shunilla, Shakti, they came, just before, it is just before, when Sachi and their team tried to write, started writing, just before that, when in Bengali Sunil Gangopadhyay and Shakti Chakraborty, these people were writing, it became more a self-expression. It no longer remained all about flower and chocolates. It's about their depression, their failure in love, their their defeat in love. That also became a part of the love poem. And if we talk about me, to me, the love poems are, well, one is, of course, the expression, I mean, the expression of the feelings. But apart from that, to me, it is more important, when something, say, for example, if a relationship, a feeling is developed towards someone, that is also love. When the feeling is breaking down, when I'm losing that, that is also love.
That's a different
So
kind of
that,
love that we see.
yeah, that is also a kind of thing which has come to poetry. Uh, uh, all I'm talking about is from the background of the Bengali poetry, but whatever I have read in the other poems also, other languages, Indian languages poems also, the same thing has more or less happened there also. Shanto should be able to tell me more about this. So this is what we will come to the poetry slowly, but this is, with the introduction, I can tell about what is happening about love in the poetry in today's context.
Uh, so I think that's a very succinct discussion, rather a very compact idea that Sir gave us regarding love in contemporary poetry, love in modern poetry. Just one thing, when you were talking about this expression thing about Tagore's perspective. So, in any case, do you find Tagorean love poems to be of contemporaneous nature? Like you were talking about the flowers and the chocolates and everything, a traditional aura that is associated with Tagorean poems. So, do you, in any case, think that it does lack some kind of modernity? Tagorean poems.
Yes,
It's
yes, yes.
definitely
I
lacking.
always, yeah, I
Okay,
always felt so, and this is only in regards to his poetry, not regards to his songs.
okay,
It's
okay.
only regard to the poetry. His poetry talks about everything good, everything, all well-beings, all good thoughts, everything good about whoever it is, whatever it is. One important element of modernity is, what we called is the evil thought.
Okay.
Evil thought in a relationship, the evil thought in anything, in what is related to love. That is one important aspect of modernity which is missing in Tagore's poetry. But surprisingly, in Tagore's songs, this element is very much present there. And the evil thought is very much present there. And that is why you will find his songs still has survived and is still very, very popular among the people. Whereas there are very few who today read Tagore's poetry apart from their text, apart from where they are, it's a compulsory reading. Apart from that, it's more the songs that have survived. And that is because that modernity, the element of modernity, that evil thought
Hmm.
is missing in Tagore's poetry.
Okay. So I think we can just take. We will just take that. That's something actually to take from poet Prabalkumarbasu, who is talking about this evil thought. We need to think about it and restructure, because technically, when we have been going through the canons of literature, Tagore occupies, a very specific space which we always look up to. But I think that it's time that we also deconstruct as and when we are going to love poetry, read modern poetry. So we see Tagore also has a bundle of contrarieties in multiple aspects. So Thank you, sir, for this very insightful discussion that we have just started with. I'll just move on to Santosh, sir, regarding today's topic, like your viewpoints, your translational parts, and also obviously when you are writing love poems, when you read love poems, regional poetry, poetry of the world. So, what can we just expect as a form of your viewpoint for this?
Um, Sreetanwi, when we speak of love poems, quick thing that comes to my mind is Shakespeare. There are so many sonnets written by Shakespeare that's based on love. And he is still favorite of the masses even after 200 plus years.
Exactly.
Uh, uh, what you call it's like the impact of Tagore and his poems in Bengali literature. It took years for Bengali writers to evolve themselves from the shadow of Tagore and his poetry. Similarly, when we see the impact of Shakespeare in Indian English literature or for any kind of literature from different regions or countries, they do have an impact of Shakespeare and his poetry. When you speak of love poems in Indian scenario, I have come across several anthologies edited by different people on love poems. Like we have an anthology edited by Priya Chabria. We have another anthology edited by, I guess, I'm forgetting the name of that person. It's the second anthology which I have gone. There are three anthologies, in fact, and we have several wonderful love poems in those anthologies written by Vivek Narayan, Akhil
Hmm.
Katiyal. So many are there. They have
Indian English
included
poet.
yeah, the translation of regional poetry also has come into some anthologies where we have the poetry of Balamani Amma, the well-known Malayalam women poet. Her poetry has been translated in this particular anthology. And when we come to Malayalam, when you speak of love poetry, the best example is Changampura, the classical poet whose Ramanan, it's a classical work which is still read, understood, and discussed and debated by the Keralites and non-Keralites alike. It's a huge work of love poem, and unfortunately, it's a betrayal. The whole poetry speaks about betrayal of love, and it's a classic work. I have time and
Yeah.
again read that particular poetry. And you speak of modern poets, we have our our very own Sachidanandan sir. His poetry on love, wonderful poems he has written on love poetry. And as Prabalkumar sir was saying, love could be anything. It could be a relation between mother and son, father and daughter, husband and wife, guru and shishya. Anything it could be, which has a pure relation, a pure connection. It's not the kind of uh, taboo kind of love we are talking about. The pure love which comes from the heart, it comes from your relation. And it's not easy to pen love poems like the normal poems which we write, maybe nature poems or humanistic poems. But to pen something on love, it's not easy because you have a different theme. Which shouldn't be like a statement also when you communicate the poem, because what I see translating poetry or literature in the last 28 years in 5 Indian languages is
Hmm.
as on today, the modern poets whom we call the modern poets or the upcoming poets, uh, the thing is that they don't read poetry, they don't read literature. They want to write, they want to get published. So what happens is, without understanding what poem is, what poetry is, what love poem is, they go on writing. I remember one of my professor, a Hindi professor from Andhra University, Professor Adeshwar Rao sir. He always, what do you call, kindles spirit in me. He says, Santosh, if you want to uh, write good poetry, write good fiction, you should read your masters.
Exactly. Exactly.
What we normally do is we don't read our masters. We don't read our seniors. We don't read our contemporary. But we say, I'm an English poet. I'm a Malayalam poet. I'm a Tamil poet. What are these people doing? I don't understand. I believe personally, I need to be, if I call myself as a Hindi poet, after 3 Hindi poetry collection published in Hindi, I am rooted in a tradition that starts from at least the early starting of Adhunik Kal to the postmodern poetry, where I understand and read and engage in discussions about my poets, about the senior poets who have come up, with whom I am connected. That's the way I understand or underline myself as a poet in Hindi, as an young poet. But what you see today is that the youngsters don't work very hard. I'll tell you one example. A dancer, when you call him as a dancer, he needs or she needs years and years of expertise and practice. After that, he calls himself as a dancer.
Exactly.
Similarly, it's the case of a singer. He, what you call rehearsals, he practices. After years of expertise, he calls himself as a singer. But what about a poet? He has nothing to do. He'll just scribble some 10 lines, and he says, I am a poet. There's no hard work for a poet. But according to me, poetry is not what they do or they write or they see. It's something very serious, and in literary genres, as all three of you know, is the highest form of literature, poetry, and it cannot be taken lightly, as the youngsters, most of them, do in the social media.
Oh, okay, so that was wonderful. That
I
was
guess Prabal Kumar sir was about to say something, sir.
yeah. I'll just go to. I
Yeah,
just
I have one question.
Hmm.
Actually, one question I thought is: can
Yes.
anyone write a love poem without falling in love with someone?
No,
How do
sir,
you feel?
it's impossible. It's impossible. You need to have experienced that feeling to write the poem. No doubt.
You have to fall in love to write a love poem.
Yes, of course. You have to have that feeling, sir. That's what I said. The relation between ma beta, your relation between your spouse, even with your children, the wavelength of love differs from person to person. But you need to experience that to write. There's no doubt about that. That's my personal opinion.
So we take
Yes,
every type of
I
falling in love in that. Every type of falling in love. So falling and hurting yourself, falling in love, every type of falling do we take in that. So each and every time we take that first-hand experience. So as per sir, I'll just refer to one conversation that I had with poet Prabalkumarbasu, only Prabal sir. I remember when he just advised me just discussing poetry, he advised about for poetry. I just remember him saying that first of all you have to know what you are going to write. আমি বাংলাতেই বলছি, সিন্স উই আর ডিলিং উইথ আ বাইলিঙ্গুয়াল জার্নাল। কি লিখতে চাইছো এবং কেমন ভাবে লিখতে চাইছো, কি বলতে চাইছো আর কেমন ভাবে বলতে চাইছো, what you are trying to say through poetry and how you are trying to say. I remember, Provalda, we had a discussion once when we were talking about your poetry and when I asked for certain suggestions from you as well. So I remember how very in a very simplistic way he explained the entire crux of the thing. Whether we can get certain thing from that or whether we nourish ourselves as per what he says, that remains a question. But then I remember Provalda saying, and I was inspired by this, what he said actually. So, Santosh sir, thank you so much for this insightful discussion that we are going through. Yeah, I'll move
If
on
I can
to.
add one thing, Sreetanwi,
Yes.
if you permit me
Yeah,
to add one
sure,
thing,
sure, sir.
what Santosh, what you were saying about, this a dancer when goes through, he or she has to go through a process before he or she can really perform to the public. Actually, if you see, apart from literature rather, in all other art form, whether it is performing art or whether it is pure art, that means whether it is literature or whether it is music, it is art, I mean painting or anything, every
Exactly.
art form apart from literature has a process of learning.
Exactly.
And there is a formal process of learning.
Yes.
Only in the creative literature is the only part where there is no formal process of learning, though there are various universities, especially in abroad, and I have attended one of such section in Australia, Melbourne. Now, the thing is that there are creative workshops like thing, but that's not the formal, the way of learning. That is, this form of art, the literature, is something which one has to understand from his or her within, and then express. And the only learning can come from reading the traditional literature of that particular language, and reading what the classics those are there in that particular language.
Okay.
I
Very
mean,
true, sir.
without that, you cannot take it to a new dimension.
I think that's a very good point that is raised, and that will again, taking that cue from Sir what he said just now, and taking cue from what both of you said. We see in modern poetry, modern love poetry as such, when we take the structural and the entire framework of things together, we see multiple forms of experimentation. As Santosh sir, he was saying just now that we find people writing more, getting, there is a tremendous urge to get published. We have a spate of publication houses, we have self publishing, we have things coming up which are actually encouraging them to read less, maybe, or discouraging them to read, or they are going more for this publishing thing. Whatever they write, it's a kind of, sometimes it's an unnecessary form of publishing, maybe. In any case, there is a certain question, like, we find a lot of experimentations that are going on in modern love poetry as such. Say post 1980s, when we take up post 1990s, the entire world poetry scenario. And the way we started with, say, we have studied in academia Love Song of Alfred Prufrock, when Eliot is writing that style also sometimes becomes extremely obsolete when people are now experimenting with newer styles, newer structural frameworks, newer rhythms, breaking rhymes, breaking rhythms. So, in that case, where exactly do you see style in modern poetry, or is there a definite style or pattern or a grammatical framework that we need to adhere to in order to understand? How do we apply that, or how do we need to learn that, get accustomed to that? So, in modern poetry, where exactly this breakage of styling, or breaking the style to create a new, deconstructing and reconstructing, how this goes on from the Indian perspective, also from the world perspective also.
Santosh, please.
We
Yeah,
have
yeah. Okay,
Protai
fine.
Hamid from Bangladesh,
Um,
one of our friends. Hi, Protai sir. He's saying nice session. Regards to all. Okay, thank you so much for being present in our show. Yes, sir. Over to you.
yeah, what I understand is, as I spoke about the tradition of poetry in each Indian language, or be it in the world language, uh, the rhyming, or what you call the poetry which is written in meter is no more relevant. Relevant in the sense that if someone has to write a poetry in meter, be it in Malayalam or be it in English style of rhyming the poetry, it's not easy to construct that particular poem on that particular theme. For example, if I speak of Malayalam poetry, maybe today there are only handful of poets, including Sachidanandan sir, who writes or who can write poetry in meter. But with my experience of more than 2.5 decades of translating poetry in Indian languages, in regional languages, what I gather is modern poetry is written in free verse.
Hmm.
Hardly 10% of the poets, maybe younger generation or the senior poets, they still continue to write in both the forms, in meter and in free verse. Now, when somebody writes something in meter, it becomes difficult for the translator to translate that particular poem in into another Indian language or into English, because you can't find the same kind of meter existing in another regional Indian language, or for that matter, if you take it to English from Malayalam, it becomes difficult because the style of English poetry is entirely different from the style of poetry written in meter in Indian languages, or what we call the regional languages. There are two things when you speak of things written in poetry written in meter. Firstly, the poem that is written in meter is always it could always be sung like a poem, like a ghazal, or like a song. It can be sung, but it's very difficult to tune, uh, to understand the poem, to give a tune to the poem, and then you sing the poem. I have seen so many people saying that, yes, Santosh, my new album has come. It's my poetry sung by one of my one of my friend who is a singer. Now that poetry is not written in meter at any point of time. It's just written in free verse, but they are trying to given a tune, a music. They have composed it. They bought it as an album. But whereas the poetry that's written in meter, you need not do anything. As you read the poem, you find rhythm in the poem, and you can easily give a mood to the poem, and you can recite the poem. That's the basic difference between the poetry written in meter and the poetry that is written in free verse.
So that's I think a very clear thing that he
Yes, sir.
explained.
Prabal, sir.
Yes, sir. We'll move on to
Yeah,
Prabal, sir.
we have gone into the form and the
Technical
structure,
nitty-gritty, right. But we
structure of
would
the
love to hear
poetry,
something from our
which is
poet.
also an interesting topic. In fact, the form, content. In fact, at times the content defines the form,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
in some cases we find the form also defines the content. What has
Content. Yes.
happened? What my experience is, uh, a new language of poetry has evolved internationally, which you can call the international language of poetry, which means, say, in any language, anywhere in Europe or anywhere in any language, today the modern poetry, the way they people represent that, in Indian regional language also, there is a large group who also write the poetry in the same diction, same language.
Okay.
Yes.
Besides, there are, what you say, 10%, maybe 10%, maybe 15%, they still follow the old pattern of rhymes. But maybe because of the globalization or whatever it is, our language which has come out, which is the international language of poetry, where in each and every language people, a good number of people practice that, which we call the modern language of poetry. uh, that has evolved. And even love is, because the topic is love, so I'm coming back to love. And love
Exactly.
is also presented in a different way. You see, love traditionally in Bengali language, love used to be represented more in the rhyme form.
Hmm.
But we have moved away from there, and since there is an element of evil thought in the rhyme, evil thought in the love expression of love, and love is also not the making of love, it's also, breaking of love is also a love poem. And also along with that, the physicality has come, the physical touch of which is the sex element of the love, say for example, that has also come. So with this, the entire language, the diction of the poetry is changing. I think it is happening in all and every languages. We can read some of the poems to understand that, but this is what I feel is, if Santosh or Sreetanwi can comment,
Yes,
if you
sir.
Yeah,
have any.
I'll just move on to Santosh sir, and we have people posting their comments, likes, and we will also be taking up if questions do come in after we are nearing the end of the session. And Mohitosh Roy, we have Ba khub bhalo lagche, nice. He is feeling that it's a good program going on. Thank you, Mohitosh. We are having Guna Moran. We are having from Assam. We have people from Assam today who have joined us for all three of you, but unfortunately, we are not having Ketokidi. She is having some kind of technical problem from her end. We are just calling her. We are in touch with her. Sir, after you just go on, we will be hearing some of your poems. Like we had a lot of discussion as of now. We'll be hearing Probalda. We'll be hearing
Yeah, Santosh, you
Santosh
can you
sir.
can you can
Yes,
start with Santosh. Yeah,
you
definitely.
can. Yes.
Uh, Actually, I have three poetry collections in Malayalam and three in Hindi, and one in English translation. But love poems, very few which I have written. I'll just read English translation of one of my Malayalam poem. It's a very
Oh,
very short one. Uh, the title of the poem is Love Note.
yeah.
Love Note. Love Note. Yeah, we have Ketaki ma'am. I
Ketaki
guess
ma'am is
he
here,
continues
right?
with us.
Hi,
Yeah,
Ketaki,
Ketaki.
you are having problem at your end.
Yeah. Ketaki, can you
Yeah,
hear
okay.
us? Okay, okay. Well, here, sir. I'm just having a talk with us. Sir, you please continue.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. Love note. Uh, Friends invade our love. We did not do anything as the regular lovers did. Friends invade our love. We did not do anything as the regular lovers did. Even today, we are in love. She has her family and I have mine.
That's so nice. That's so nice. That's indeed a very short one, but you told so many things.
I'll just read one or two from my
Yes,
English
yes, sir. Please,
collection.
please.
Uh, this also can be called a sort of love poem. It's titled Ghazal. I love you from the bottom of my heart. May you have all the blessings. What is it that attracted me to you? Your smile, touch, or lust? You are my music. I am your ghazal.
Okay. Yes, sir. One more, please.
Yeah, yeah. I'll. This is again a translation of my Hindi poem. Um the silence between us. Your definition of love is different from that of mine. You have your own argument. Anyway, I don't want to say anything. If I say you won't listen, I wanted to ask you, how are you doing now? Meeting you was a coincidence. Select, accept, being together, leaving you, again to be on terms. Reaching this far, it's difficult to keep the balance. There are chances to slip and fall. The silence between us was beautiful. Your silence was not mere silence, it was momentary. You thought I'll be angry with you? You are my best gift, like life, with little woes, little laughter.
Okay.
Great.
Great. I think the one of the finest lines that we had, that is the precarious condition that you already experience. You always, in fact, there is a tendency to experience that precarious condition in love where you talked about that slip and fall. So you have your voice, I have mine. So that difference that is there, and including that uniqueness, or including or embracing that difference also, that becomes very pertinent in modern poetry, I think. So we have question, we have our viewers, we have our audience coming in. We have Sujata Pal talking about the rich session. Thank you, Sujata. Congratulations to the panelists. We have question for our panelists, I think. From Assam, we have Guna Moran, where he asks about, dear ma'am, one question. Why should we read a poem, or why does a poet compose his poetry? I cordially ask for the two answers from all of you that are taking part in this session. Uh, Two very simple questions. Why should we read a poem, and why does a poet compose his poetry? So I just pass over these two questions. We still have not got a track of what technical faults are there at Ketokidi's end. So I'll just take these questions up to sir. Any one of you, if you are willing
One
to
second.
answer.
Recently, can you
Yeah.
just connect it to the FB page so that few of my colleagues also could join in
Yeah, so it's
attending this?
actually live on your page. It's actually live on your page. I shared it on your page.
Is it?
But,
But
they can enter. Huh.
No, but it's not visible. My wife is there
It's not.
sitting beside me. She's
It's
trying
not.
to access.
Yeah,
It's
I
not.
am also getting messages that they are not able to access.
They're not
Yeah, yeah,
able to access, but I have just
yeah.
shared it onto your page. Let me just check once. I'll just share once to your page. I think I
Please, please,
shared once more. I'll
please,
check.
please do it once again. Yeah,
Yeah, I'll just check once. I'm sharing to both of you.
she's
You will
sharing it
just,
once again.
I'm sharing once again.
Yeah.
Just see. Mm. Okay, so yeah, in between, I'm just adding that page to your profiles. If you just answer to one of the questions that we have now. Uh, why should we read a poem, or why does a poet compose his poetry? This is one question that we have from one of the audiences who is present here.
I think Prabal Kumar sir can go with go with that.
Yeah, precisely two questions he posted. Why should we read a poem, or why does a poet compose his poetry? These two.
Okay, there is a very easy answer to it. Why you read a poem is basically it's a choice. You read it because you like it, you love it, you get something
Exactly,
from that. There's a very light answer
exactly.
to that, but then it's really a serious question. Why you read? Why people go to art? Why? Recently, in fact, I have written a big article on the same. Why people see you one have to think why art has survived over a period of thousands and thousands of years. Art is not something which you need on your day-to-day living, but still art has survived. We have recently, about 1.5 years back, somewhere in Indonesia, in Sulawesi Island, it has been discovered, the oldest art form has been discovered, which is dated back to 43,900 years, which is almost 44,000 years. The question is
Okay.
why art has survived. So art has definitely, I'm not going to the depth because it calls for taking a class of 2 hours, which I can take, but this is not the time. So art has definitely an element of inputs, an element of thing which is in our daily lives, in our evolution of our daily lives, in sustenance of the daily lives. That is why art has sustained, art has survived, and we go to the art. Everyone does not go to the art. The sensitive mind
Yeah.
who has the urge to evolve, who has the urge to carry the dream. They need the support of art for their own existence, for their own sustenance, and to evolve and grow their dream. And poetry is one form of art, it is the finest form of art. So, people who understand poetry, that's why they go to the poetry, they read poetry. By reading poetry, basically, you realize or you understand yourself. In every person there is a known I and there is an unknown I.
Exactly.
When you go to the art, you realize or you discover a portion of your unknown I, and that gives you a pleasure. Ultimately art gives you a pleasure. So to get that pleasure, to understand the unknown I of yourself, you go to the poetry. But these are all in-depth discussion. Actually you go to the poetry because you love poetry, you like poetry, you get something from the poetry, and what you get is again a matter of detailed discussion. This is the answer to the first question. What is the second question?
The second question is, why does a poet compose his poetry?
Why does a poet
Why
compose
does a poet compose his poetry?
well, a poet compose, that is also it can be addressed from various aspects, but one main aspect is a poet at the end of the day, what he wants to understand himself, he also wants to discover himself, and he is an element higher than the person. The poet as a person is an element higher than the person who is reading the poetry. A poet and a reader, there is a difference of 1 degree. One writes and one does not write, that's all. So one is also in search of something, that is that unknown I. The poet is also in search of something, but from a different plane. So whatever is happening surrounding him and inside him, that gives him a way, a journey, a path through which he tries to discover himself or herself more and more. That is why he or she writes the poem.
I think that's
Santosh, should you have anything to add?
so. I would just, if Provalda permits, I can just add one thing. If you
Yeah,
permit me to, yes. Just
please.
one thing, when you were talking about this I, the discovering of the other I. Can we also, when we are dealing with the homophonic part, can we also talk about the EYEI as well? When we are talking about the other I, can it be the other I as well that we also take up in modern poetry? The eye for seeing, the
No,
other
the
eye,
other
visible.
eye, the other eye is the
So do we
instrument.
take that as the other self? Okay. So that's the
The
instrument
other,
part that we are saying.
yes, the other eye is
Okay.
the instrument which we
Okay.
utilize to reach to that I.
Okay. 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 So singing with
Yeah,
that I, EYE, and
we
discovering the
take the
other
help
I.
of that I. We take the
Okay.
help of that other I
Another eye.
to
Okay.
reach to
Okay.
that unknown I.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Santosh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So we'll take up
I'll
some.
just make it very simple. For me, poetry is the celebration of my personal being. Uh, it's my response to the outside world. If you take the history of civilization, you will understand that poets were sentenced and put in prison, not fiction writers, novelists, or dramatists. The
Yes.
simple reason, the simple reason that there is fire in poetry. They could tell things in small, not in big. As simple as it. And writing or composing poem, it's purely personal. As Prabal sir said, it's your choice. You can go for a fiction, you can go for a drama, you can go for a poetry. Now it's up to you to decide why one wants to read poetry, because it can trigger thoughts in you. It can make you think in different perspectives, in different angles, which I guess fiction has its own limitations, even though fiction is something nice as a genre of
Sri, are
literature.
you
But
there?
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah. I
I
can hear
prefer,
you. I can hear you. Yes.
yeah, but I prefer it as my personal response to the happenings. And as Prabal sir said, it's my response to the I that I have found within me.
I'm visible.
Hmm. Okay, so
True.
I think yeah, Prabal sir will go on once more. Yeah, yeah, we can take. I think Ketokidi is here after after a long time. She has been trying for, but there were technical glitches. So Ketokidi, can you hear us? Ketokidi, can you hear us? I think there is some technical fault on her end. Ketokidi, can you hear us?
Can you see me now?
Yeah, there is some lagging on part
Yes,
of your.
I
Yeah, there is some lagging in part of your
can
microphone.
you see me?
Yeah, I can see and hear you. There is some problem with the microphone. Okay, fine. Again, we have
Let,
a technical fault.
let's
Anyway,
see.
let's.
Yeah. So, any other
So
question?
as of now, we are having no questions, but we have a lot of responses. We have Professor Debanjan Banerjee, who is the professor from Media Department from NSHM Kolkata. Debanjan Da says, "Go ahead." We have Zakir Zafran from Bangladesh. Love to see you all live. Thank you, Zakir. Gayatri Devi Borthakur. We have Gayatri from Assam. Watching and listening, you all a good evening. Thank you, Gayatri. And Okay, so we have one question from Zakir, I think, from Bangladesh. We have Zakir, like to hear something on the language of poetry. How should it be? Pro people, or should it only be like a poet playing with words? I think that's a very pertinent question right at this point of time. Uh, like to hear how should it be? Pro people, how should the language of poetry be? Pro people, or should it only be like a poet playing with words? So I'll
Santosh,
just
should you like to? Santosh, should you like to
Yeah,
take
respond?
up.
According to me, it's not both. It's not pro people or it's not the other way. Because poetry, see, it depends
Can you
on.
see me?
Yes, I can see you. I think we have the other guest also. Yes, sir. Sir, you please go ahead. I'll take up
Yeah,
ma'am after this. Yes.
yeah. So it depends on what aspect you are going to write. For example, I was working in Vishakhapatnam. I was there for 20 years, and I was
I
staying
can't
very
see
close to the
him.
beach. It's the way I moved to
I
my
can't see
residence
him
and I moved to my office.
anywhere.
So near the parapet of the beach, I
Such a
see a
network
woman
problem. What should I
selling
say?
corns. She is feeding a
Massive
baby,
network.
and she has a child which is trying to take
Shall
this
I put
corn
this
which
on?
is
Okay.
fried.
Ma'am, can you
Now,
please put your microphone
I
mute?
have seen this particular
Of course, I'll do it.
scene, or maybe I am regularly seeing this particular scene, but it's not necessary that the next day I pen a poem on that particular scene what I have witnessed. It may be it gets embedded like a seed within me, and maybe down the line after 5 to 6 years, I am recollecting that particular incident, and all of a sudden the poetry takes place. So it's almost like giving birth. It takes its own form. That's what I experienced from my kind of translation and my kind of writing. Poetry does take a shape. We cannot, like we hit the iron rod and try to get a shape what we want from that iron rod. It cannot happen the same way with poetry. The poem comes with a shape. When you write, many of them have asked me, like we say for films, take one, take two, take three. How do you write poetry? Now, it's very rare that take one, you have a fine poem, uh, perf- fine poem, perfect in all aspects. No, it doesn't take place. Uh, what I have heard from my seniors and my experience is it takes three for making a good poem. Three in the sense, three form it takes. You write a poem, keep it, keep it aside. Maybe after 2 weeks or maybe after 1 week, again you revisit the poem. You again reframe the poem, redraft the poem, keep it again the same way. Just leave it. Maybe again after 1 month, maybe after 2 months, maybe after 1 week. It all depends on your mood. You go for the third draft, you correct the draft, and then you get a poem. Many of the masters, they have spoken about this kind of writing, where a good poem is finished in 3 steps, in three sittings, or in 3 takes. Maybe you can put it that way.
Okay. So there is one question that is attached to that particular part only. How
Okay.
the language of poetry should be? Should it be pro people? I'll take that with Prabal, and we find Ketokiti is also there. So should the language of poetry be pro people? If ma'am can also answer, then that will also be good. But we'll take up Prabal. Then after that, we'll take up Ketokidi. What is her views on today's evening's topic? So, well, it's Prabal
See,
sir's turn now.
there is nothing called pro people or whatever the other thing is. That when you go to listen to classical music, say someone playing a sharod or someone playing a sitar, so will you ask the music will be pro people or not? You'll not ask, will it?
Exactly.
you
Yes.
need to you need to have some sort of education, basic education about that subject, whether it is music, whether it is poetry, or
Exactly.
whether it is art, to understand or to receive the communication what the poet wants to say. Unless you have that, I mean, you can't. It's not poet's responsibility to make things, pro people or something like that. There is nothing called pro people or whatever it
Exactly.
is.
You write for yourself whatever you feel. So if you just go on sticking or adhering to that pro people tag, I don't think that that
Yeah,
essence of
yeah,
poetry
yeah,
can be felt.
yeah,
So
absolutely, absolutely.
we have another guest tonight. we will take up Dr. Ketaki Dotto, and welcome, ma'am, to the show. Although there was this entire technical glitch that we were having, there is, yeah, I have unmuted her. Ma'am, if you can hear, ma'am, can you hear us? There is some problem
No, we
regarding.
can see her, but I think there is some problem with the microphone.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Okay, okay. Anyway, she is again
Uh,
not there. Anyway, so we
okay.
will take this up now.
Meanwhile,
We can
let me
listen.
read.
Yes, we
Let
will
me
be.
read
We
two
will be
poems.
here. Yes, we
Yeah, yeah,
will.
Prabal sir, please read. Yeah.
Yes, we were waiting for this only. We think we had enough of question answers and discussions.
Okay, what do we call love poem? The first poem is All of a Sudden.
Okay.
If I suddenly fall in love all over again, and I in flames jump into the water, thinking you to be there, all the water vaporizes by the sudden touch of fire. How will you then hide yourself if all of a sudden all these premonitions come true?
Wow.
Okay.
My second poem is what I was saying that the building of love is also love poem, and the breaking of love is also a love poem.
Exactly.
So my this poem is a breaking of love sort of thing. It's marriage anniversary.
Wow.
Okay.
Our marriage anniversary is scheduled for tomorrow. Today is the eve of annulment of our wedding. Yet we hadn't planned any festivities for either of the two events. Slightly backdated, regulated, and somewhat nagging too. Surely you don't enjoy it anymore. Even I have recently overcome the shallow emotion to reminisce the special day. It's winter. On the eve of our anniversary, let's go for a walk. For the last time, let us walk together.
Nice
I
one,
can
sir.
feel the air of concealed excitement. On the eve of the dissolution of the sacred vows, you tripped while walking by my side. I steadied you for the last time. You took away your hand cautiously, somewhat frightened. You realize this unwanted marriage anniversary thrust upon us has no worth anymore. Instead, tonight, let us speak of the forthcoming days. Actually, some of these days still secretly will belong exclusively to us.
Good one, sir.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think it
Nice point.
tells it tells more and it hides the most. We have so much yet to hear, so much yet to discover. We have Dr. Ketaki Datta amongst us tonight. There were much technical issues after which we are now seeing her. So, ma'am, welcome to the show tonight, and we would
Thank you.
love to hear from you.
Thank
Today's
you.
topic: love in
Thank
modern
you.
poetry.
Thank
If
you,
you
Dr.
can,
Alex. Thank you, Professor Prabalkumarbasu. Now, what is love? You talked a lot about the nitty gritty of poetry, nitty gritty of writing poetry, but I think that as today's topic is Adhunik Kavitaye Prem, love in modern poetry, let me talk about love in a nutshell.
we are having
Everybody knows about love.
microphone lagging.
What
Yeah.
is love? Can, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Can
yeah,
you
I
hear
can.
me?
Yeah, yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Voice was breaking, yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah, can you hear us, ma'am? Yeah, Ketokidi, can you hear us? I think there is again some technical fault on her. Um, yeah, we are having a yet again. Yeah, from her end, we are having a technical issue. So I'm trying to reconnect to her. Meanwhile, we'll see how people are responding to the show, and I've shared it on your profiles as well, so it will be visible from your profile. So if you can just talk a little bit about the poetry scenario, the modern poetry scenario that we have as of now, the contemporary love poem. Whereas we talked about modernism, we talked about the structure, we talked about people writing, the lacuna that might be formed at times, the spaces that are created, the the vacuum that is left, the vacuum is yet to be created. So where exactly are we heading to, in my terms, when we are, say, from academic perspective, I'm telling, or from the academia when we are teaching, or beyond the academia, even in different other segments, when we talk about festivals, when we talk about publications, we have different representations, like poetry, photos, ceremonies, shows, and exhibitions, and everything. But then, where is the future as such of modern poetry heading? When we talk about regional poetry as well, we take up Bangla, we take up Tamil, we take up Hindi, Assamese, any other language that we take up, and English, obviously, as a general unified contemporary component, if we are taking that. So my question is, where is this future of modern poetry, love, if we take that, where is it heading to? What can we say about the future advancements as such? Or is it in a very, latent stage, or yet to be discovered, or something more to be added, or some things that need to be deleted as such? So where are we heading to in terms of modern poetry? I mean,
Santosh?
yes.
Yeah. Uh, Modern poetry, as far as my this one goes, it's heading in a right direction, in the sense that we have very good poets writing in regional languages as well as in English language. Uh,
Voice is not clear.
Yeah. So,
Hello.
yes,
Yeah,
sir.
you
Now we
can hear
can
me?
hear you. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Modern poetry, as far as my knowledge goes, it's heading into the right direction. We have very good young poets coming up in regional languages as well as in English. Uh, if you talk of love poetry in modern poets, as the young poets, then maybe if you could weigh it in terms of percentage, it's kind of, it speaks less of love, because the thing is that it's a thing which cannot be written all of a sudden. You need to experience it. That's what we were discussing from the beginning. Uh,
Hmm.
the a person who has an experience of love at 40, it's different from a person who's experiencing it 50, and it's again different from a person who is experiencing it at 60. So it differs according to your age and your experience. So when you talk of young Indian poets in writing in the regional languages, you term it as something below 40. Now below 40, to experience a kind of love that's pure, uh, that's represents a very positive, on a positive note, and to put that particular theme into poetry and then write poetry, it's not as easy as you write taking on different subjects, or even though love is a universal feeling, it's not easy to write love poems, be it in any regional languages. So in terms of if you take maybe 50 poems, maybe hardly 5 poems or less than that would come under love poems. But definitely, modern poetry in Indian regional languages heading toward the right position. And as a translator, also, I would like to make a point. There are our regional literature is so rich, poetry, fiction, novel, whatever it is, it's so rich that we should have, or we lack, quality translators, because of which these good writers in regional languages are not being known to other regional languages. They remain within that particular groove of their regional languages. So we need good poets, as well as good translators who can poem, because translating poetry is the difficult part than translating literature, as you all may know. So
Exactly.
we need excellent translators to translate between regional languages and English, so that all other regional languages and English can benefit and know about a new poet, an young poet, or a senior poet writing in writing poetry in those particular language.
Okay, yeah, no, I fully agree, because that is where, we, when we talk about this translation part, it becomes almost a kind of variable component that we are seeing, that has been happening now, and as a part of the experimentation in modern poetry, taking love poems together. So that is exactly what you said, and it's, every day I feel this keeps on changing. The tenor of poetry, the structure, the coloration that
Exactly.
we have, the components that are added to it. And one thing that you said, people are not generally writing about this enigma called love anymore. What I feel also while teaching and while also going beyond academia, they are
Yeah.
not dealing with something that is extremely enigmatic, but that is,
Exactly.
it is something which is more of a kind of the regular variations of the monotony that is attributed to everyday life, the patterns that we go through every day, and the components that come up, the loss, the suffering, like the kind of poetry that we find in Wordsworth, or say in any other poetic forms. When we talk about the poets workshop in Calcutta post 1950, 1951, 1955, that particular period of time, we have poets like Kamala Das coming in, we have Nissim Ezekiel coming in, all with structural experimentations and newer forms and patterns. So I think this goes on as a very recurrent and relentless process of experimentation, relentless process that goes on in inducing all the complexities that are associated with love. What I feel, all the complexities, all the multiple parameters that are attributed to the erstwhile traditional thing called love. So that is
Yeah.
also there, I think.
Exactly. It keeps on changing as time goes. It keeps on
As time
changing.
goes on, exactly,
Exactly.
exactly. So
Exactly.
I have people coming in. We have Kathakali Banerjee. Thanks, Kathakali. Kathakali told very interesting, loved it. Abhirup Majumdar, we found watching ma'am incredible discussion. Thanks, Abhirup. If we can just from our journal, if we can just give our audience feeling what the current poetry is all about, where your regional, Indian, and world poetry, or modern poetry stands as of now. So that again will be, if we can share some such valuable insights, that will be a kind of gift to us only. So we also thank Abhirup Majumdar, Sandeep Mishra sir. He's there. Sandeep Mishra sir is associated with our own journal. He is one of the members of the editorial boards that we have. Sandeep Mishra sir, thank you so much for joining. Do modern trends in poems celebrate eternal love? One question, sir, that we are having. We think we are not able to connect to Prabal, the poet Prabalkumarbasu. We are not able to connect to him. So we will take this. Prabal, sir, lost the link, I think. I think he lost the link. So, Santosh sir, since
Yeah.
Ketaki ma'am is also not there, I'm trying to connect Prabal sir. In between, if you can just take up this question: do modern trends in poems celebrate eternal love? That is one question asked by Sandeep Mishra. Do modern trends in poems celebrate eternal love?
Now, like I said, love is not something so easy to write, and to connect it to the modern trend of poetry, it's very difficult thing, because the current trend in poetry, if you ask me, it's actually the kind of literature that is coming out after the pandemic. Actually, we are not gone
Hmm.
out of the pandemic situation still, but people have already started to speak it as uh, uh, literature before pandemic and literature after pandemic. There is a thrust of literature that's happened in this pandemic times, especially poetry, and that particular poems which have come up is based on, I'll tell you, it cannot be called as a trend, because See, we have seen the migrant laborers walking the kilometers and kilometers to reach their particular hometown, walking on the streets of Delhi. That is one
Mhm.
incident. We have seen another incident where these migrant workers walking on the railway track was moved down by a train and it moved on. That was another
Mhm.
incident. And we see the people are being treated as animals. They have been packed into buses and trams and trains, and then they have been taken back to their hometown. That is actually inhuman on the part of whoever is trying to send them back home. Uh, See, becoming a labor, a migrant labor, does not mean that he's not a human being. Definitely, he and she and their kids are human beings. So, the post-pandemic literature that's coming out in as a form of diary, as a form of poetry, as a form of what do you call articles, it all speaks about the atrocities that's happened to these migrant laborers. First thing. Second thing, the literature that's coming out is isolation. We all
Exactly.
used to say, oh, I'm very busy, but busy for nothing. This pandemic taught us that most of us were busy for nothing. We were just trying to show it as we were busy. We were busy for nothing. It's only thing that you manage your time. See, I always see Tagore as an example when I ventured into the field of literature. Tagore was a poet, a painter, a translator, a philosopher, an artist, whatnot. He had 24 hours with me. I do have 24 hours with me. We all have 24 hours with me. What do we make of that 24 hours? I took an interview of Professor Sachidanandan when I was doing my PhD in Hindi literature. He told me, Santosh, I am a workaholic. I work for 16 hours a day. You know, the Indian Prime Minister works for 18 hours a day. Professor Sachidanandan works for 16 hours a day. That is why he is having 125 plus books to his credit. It includes translation and his own poems and articles. Now, how can an individual, uh, what do you call, uh, give time, express himself
Mhm.
for the course of literature, spend 16 hours a day? He is studying, he has to come back from his college, then spend the rest of the time maybe till 10 to 12 or maybe late night, but still 16 hours is not enough. I mean, he can't spend 16 hours, maybe 12 hours or maybe 4 to 5 hours, but still again, when you talk about the trends in poetry, it's not the kind of trend. It is the emotional bursting that has come up because of this pandemic, which is resulting in so many poetry anthologies. I know as of now, three poetry anthologies have come on the pandemic, which speaks only about the emotions, the things that happened for the migrants, and as an individual isolation. And isolation is a subject it's very difficult to emote, to express, because for
Mhm.
every individual, the isolation is different. It takes different forms.
Exactly.
So, in that way, we cannot generalize saying that trends are there in poetry. That's different. But in this pandemic situation, we cannot call it as a trend, but we could call it as the outburst of things that has happened in and around you. That is what I said. Poetry for me is my expression of things that is happening in and around me and in the society.
And to add just to what you said, that is, we again have Pravalda back here. The link was lost for a while, so welcome back. So there is one thing that I would like to add here, since you were talking about this isolation phase also. There might be this case, as a kind of defense mechanism also, where they're using this isolation phase to reverberate, that something that reverberates, that spate of isolation, in order to hide that, to conceal that, to go for that spate of poetry. That is, they're coming up with so many things, as you said. One question that came up just now: how do you think, or rather, do you think modern trends in poems, they celebrate eternal love, If you are actually, if you we are actually taking that particular phrase, taking that particular epithet here, the something which is called eternal love, we have this from Sandeep Mishra sir. Do modern trends in poems celebrate eternal love? So we will take only this question as the last one for tonight, and we have Gayatri from Assam. Gayatri has requested for a love poem of Santosh sir. We will take up love poem of Santosh sir. We will also take up one love poem from Prabal sir as well. I'm feeling so bad we could not take up Ketaki this evening. She was extremely willing to join. She also might be some technical fault that is so deeply embedded on her end. We couldn't take her so long. So we have Santosh sir and Prabal sir. This is another question that has come up. Do modern trends in poems celebrate eternal love? Do we call something called eternal love in modern poetry? It's from Sandeep Mishra. The question comes.
See, love is always eternal, whether it is expressed physically, whether it is expressed from within the heart or whatever it is. So love is always eternal. It's a question of how it is expressed. So it depends on the poet, his or her particular mood, the time, the events from which he is responding, or uh, from which he is writing the poem, he is expressing himself. It depends on that. But love is always eternal. It cannot be anything else. So that's not love. Even if it's something else. So it's all about how the poet is expressing it. That's all. And modern poetry is what the one question before I lost the connection is, what is the future of this modern poetry? Modern poetry
Exactly.
will become more modern. That's all. I mean, it will, whatever
One
was
very
modern poetry 20 years back, we express it in a different way. Maybe 20 years down the line, it will be expressed in another different way. You see, our life is changing. If you see, we are using WhatsApp or say Facebook for last 10, 12 years, not more than
exactly.
that. But then only because of the pandemic, all these live shows and all these things have come up. It was never there earlier. Before this lockdown started, it was never there that we are doing live and all those things was not in that way. Today,
Exactly.
everywhere, everyone you find is doing live. So this is how our life is changing, and things will change. Things will not remain
Change is the
stagnant.
only constant
Change is
thing that
permanent.
we
So
change
that will have an effect in our writings. That's all.
So we have one from Gayatri as well. Love is always
Yeah,
eternal.
yeah.
Nothing comes from Prabal sir. Prabal sir, whatever he says, it's very touching. He is a romantic poet. He is a romantic poet, but I think in all the terms that we have been reading Prabal sir, much yet remains to be plummeted as and when, much yet remains to be discovered, as he said, in modern poetry, and also as and when his own poetry is concerned. That's again my opinion, because I've been going through major of his poems, and also in case of Santosh sir. One thing that Gayatri has requested is for a love poem from Santosh sir.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
will.
I'm ready.
Yes,
I'm ready.
yes.
Okay. The poem is titled Radha and Krishna.
Wow.
I'll be happy when you come, like the river, stream, plants, and trees who are happy with the advent of rain. I have decorated the house for you, adorned the wall with paintings and windows with new curtains. I have kept all the words for you which have not been used for years. While we converse, they will become alive and find their beauty yet again. When you come, I'll be happy. Flowers will bloom, butterflies will fly. It would rain. The nature would be in its full glory. Yet again, we would become Radha and Krishna. Thank you.
Wow, that's so vivid. That's extremely poignant. That's extremely poignant. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
sir.
Thank you.
We will take up yet another love poem from Prabal, sir. Sir, one of your poems now.
Yeah, those words, the words that remain within me, those words which are never given a voice, those clouds that are thunder laden without a drop of rain to pour, those words pile over one another, those clouds gathered together. One day, all of a sudden, one realizes relationship has become a tree with outstretched arms. A bond never breaks. The kinship gets lost somehow.
Good one,
Wonderful.
sir.
Thanks.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Good
So
one.
that is where we talk about modern poetry. It says and it does not say, it hides, it conceals, it breaks, it creates. So this goes on. That is what our guests have been speaking tonight. So one thing that is my personal request, I told this to Santosh sir as well before starting with our program today. Santosh sir, when you were talking about your hobbies, I requested you if we can get a song tonight before we end on a very sweet note that we have been doing. So you have
That
been
will be
talking
great.
about,
That will be really great.
No,
yeah,
no,
we
no,
have,
no.
we
Sreetanwi, I don't sing. I don't sing. I like to hear songs, but I don't sing.
okay. I asked about your favorite singers, and you talked about Kishore Kumar and Yesudas. We had a discussion about that. So I thought that I'll be hearing some lines from you.
No, no, no. I do enjoy songs, but I don't sing. I don't sing.
Okay, so before we end, I'm really feeling very bad tonight because we could not get the other guest because of technical ends from her part. So maybe it's in some other great episodes, or rather some of the episodes that we are trying to. I would like to hear something for our journal from both of you. Like, we have started an initiative in 2019. By 2020, we have been able to get around 14 international indexing for our bilingual journal, and we are trying to come up with research articles each after every 6 months on different topics, as you know, drama, poetry, research articles, poems, short stories. So what would be your guidance or advice to us when we are dealing with, say, a journal which is bilingual? Any message for us or those who are dealing with journals, bilingual initiatives? So how can we excel? Like, that would be, I would not call that suggestion, but definitely your mentorship, your guidance for us.
Sir Prabal, sir, please.
Yeah, it's a good initiative. Sreetanwi has been discussing with me when before the first issue was published, and I need. It's a good initiative. I think two issues have already is there,
Yes.
and the third issue is also almost
Third
ready,
issue,
and
yes, in July.
yeah, should be published anytime. I what I have been telling her from the very first issue, from before the first issue was published, that one, when bringing up a journal, literary journal, wants to be focused about what he or she wants to do with that. What is the main idea behind the journal that should be reflected in the works. Number two should be a bit quality based. Today, what has
Yeah,
happened? Any and
exactly,
everyone is coming up with the journal, but there is
exactly.
no discrimination of the quality. So one has to be quality based. That's my only. I should not say it a suggestion, not an advice. Just my what I feel about when a new journal is there.
Yes, because I have been talking about your mentorships. I have been talking to Santosh sir. He knows right from the very beginning, when I was in that very nascent phase, just taking up that journal. I used to talk to him regarding how I am proceeding with the things. So, Santosh sir, what will be your suggestions and ideas that we can take
Yeah,
in on this?
two issues down the line, and a third issue based on world poetry. It's a good indication you are heading in the right direction. One thing that comes to my mind, if you could have a segment on translation, especially translated poems from Indian languages to English, or maybe if you get someone who is very good at translations into Bangla, then that could add to the merit of the bilingual, because poetry, you can't ask each and everyone to publish poetry, especially translations of poetry. Since it's a bilingual journal, uh, it by itself demands or asks for translations from Indian
Exactly.
languages to English or Bangla. Maybe you can discuss it with your administrative group or the editorial group, and if you can start something like that, translations into English and into Bangla, anyone may do. Then I think definitely it will elevate the journal much more. It would find more takers also.
Thank you, sir. So we will just keep that in mind, and we shall take it further to the editorial board as well. And from time to time, as you know, I keep pestering both of you for mentoring, for guiding, for giving me, for for shedding light to where we move on. We have one last question from Abhirup Majumdar. Abhirup, thank you for your question. Abhirup has a very pertinent question here, who has been watching this show right from the beginning. Abhirup has this: will love find a worthwhile position in the post COVID era writings? Poetry, to be specific, in literature, as there is only sufficient suffering and agony all around due to the virus. Will love find a worthwhile position in the post COVID era writing? That is the last question that we are taking for tonight. We have Mahfuz Al Hussein, sir, also. Best wishes to Litinfinite for bilingual initiative. So, sir, this question, if any one of you, this is the last
Prabal
question
sir,
that we're taking up.
Can you just repeat the first sentence of the question?
The first question, the first part is: will love find a worthwhile position in the post COVID era writings? Poetry, to be specific.
Okay, I got it.
Hmm.
Yes, it's the our thought process, our entire way of living is changing and will change more uh, due to this COVID-19 thing. So once what you call this COVID-19 era, what you were saying. So since this will affect our way of life in every aspect, and love is a part of our way of life. It's an element of our living. So love will also be affected in whatever way. I don't know. Maybe people will, instead of meeting regularly, they will be happy to be on the video or whatever it is. I don't know really. So the expression of love, because I know people in Calcutta, a boy and a girl, they're in love with each other desperately, but they're not able to meet because of the lockdown, because of the situation, because there is no transport. So they're not able to meet. So they have found out the other means of communication. So all these things will slowly come into poetry. It has to come, because poetry reflects whatever happens in the outside world and the inside world, and a poet only, make. I mean, is a response to all these happenings. That's all.
Santosh, sir,
You agree
if
with
you
me,
have.
Santosh?
yeah. Actually, sir, I had answered this in a question similar to this little
A previous
while ago,
question.
because
Yes.
it's because of love only the literature has come out. Post-pandemic literature which has
Absolutely,
come out, it's just
absolutely,
because of love. As simple as it is. If it was not
absolutely.
about love, not about emotions, then this kind of forcing out of literature in poetry, in diary writing, in articles would have never come
Exactly.
out, and it's coming in such large quantity. There should be a check in quality, of course, but time has never, history has never witnessed. For example, I'll give you an example. If you just go to Google and
Hmm.
type poems based on Corona, you will go mad that there are thousands of poetry that has come out based on Corona poems. Now, the person who was not a
Yeah,
poet,
yeah.
the person who didn't know how to write a poetry, has also tried to do his bit to write something on this pandemic, which has come out as poetry. That's what I was said. All things are not poetry, but the thrust of literature that has come out is really demanding, and there are many publishing houses who are ready with the editions. As soon as the lockdown is lifted up completely, there would be definitely, because one example I'll give you. Professor Sachidanandan has edited an anthology on pandemic poems, edited by himself, for Penguin. That's almost published, and the hard copy would be in market in the coming days. So this is one which I have come to know. There are several anthologies which have already come in the market as a hard copy, as an e-book, which we are not aware of, because we cannot have so much of network that we know everything that's happening. It's through our friends and through social media we come to know what is happening. That's also a reason why I use social media, because it's to showcase what is published about the articles or the poetry or the translations that have come. I share it, and similarly somebody else shares his achievement, so I get an idea. Like, we have webinars today across the country, so we are in touch with different kinds of professors, different kinds of academicians, different kinds of topics happening in and around the country. So if your time is free, you can definitely go, and if the link is attached to you, definitely go in, experience that particular talk, get enlightened. So this, as Prabal Kumar says, times are changing. Now things are happening in very fast time. Even if there is no chance, I have my own FB page where I can go live and discuss on several things, and people who are connected to me, my friends, readers, they can very well have an idea about the kind of writing that I do. That is also possible in the coming days to come.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and that is what both
Yeah,
of you have
Sreetanwi, I
been.
think we have to close now. It is
Yes,
1.5 hours almost.
Yes,
yes,
yes, exactly,
this is exactly
exactly.
about before we wind up. We have a person. We have Dr. Atikullah Dar, who is from Kashmir. Hello, sir. Thanks for being a part of this program. You are part of the audience. So we'll be winding up. As such, this discussion can go for an elongated level and umpteen the number of hours that Pravalda told right in the beginning. So we will, but as time does not permit for so long, and we'll need to wind up. Regarding this last question, we have this intensification of this isolation also, as both of you have been saying, and this actually, I think, somehow intensifies the publication and all such visions of poetry, the newer visions of poetry that are coming up as a part of the modernist trend. So that is going to stay, as sir told, Prabal sir, and it's going to go. It's advancing. It's in different loopholes are there, but still it's going forward. So we can just carry on, and we can say and end on this note that love remains there in different forms, different patterns, different angles, different dimensions, but love does remain as a part, as a very essential component of modern poetry. I think all of us will agree on that. From time to time we have experienced, so love remains as a very cherishable thing in all the poems that we read. And so, on a very loving note, we thank all our speakers tonight. We wish to.
Thank you, Sreetanwi. Thank you, Prabal sir. It was nice interacting with all both
Yes,
of you, and wish Litinfinite comes with much more
thank you,
programs
sir.
like this in future. Yeah,
Thank you
thank you.
so
All the
much.
best.
And we'll be meeting both of
Thanks,
you again for some
Sreetanwi.
other
Thanks a lot.
segments. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you,
Okay,
audience.
bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Have a
Bye.
nice time.
Good night. Good night. Take care. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye.